I did everything from the zone, the 24-hour diet, which that led me to the Tony Robbins because I heard he had one day on health. But I'd read probably 30 or 40 different books, everything that Barnes and Noble's had on the shelf. What people that have cancer do for health, what people that, had AIDS, all these different things. I'm going to strengthen my immune system. And the last book I read was, by David Wolf. I was getting colonics and doing acupuncture and doing everything I could to bring my health up. And I weighed about 235 pounds now. And it wasn't muscle. So, 5 years of being out of college, drinking beers, I was, and I didn't even want to take my shirt off anymore. And then I got cold, and every year I'd get the flu, or I'd get a cold, or I'd have issues. And so I just got tired of it. And so I when I had to go home and I couldn't even do what I wanted to do, I said, there's no freedom in this. I need to get my health on track. Otherwise, what's it going to look like in 20 years if it's this bad already, and I was, 28 at the time.
With no limitations, what does your perfect day look like? What if it's possible to live like that every day? Would you wake up after 9 a.m., have perfect health, maybe fire your boss, have the money and freedom to do what you love most? The world is your oyster. Where would you be? Who would you be with? The possibilities are endless. Whether you believe it's possible for you or not, you can make more, work less, and live free. Welcome to Freedom Hack Radio, where entrepreneur, best-selling author, world traveler, and adventurer Bryce Robertson and special guests crack the code on money, health, relationships, spirituality, and having fun doing what you love most. Be inspired to create your own self-designed freedom lifestyle.
Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Hack Radio. I'm your host, Bryce Robertson, and today we have a very special guest, Brian Acosta. Brian is the founder and CEO of Matrix Business Capital. He's a wrestling Hall of Famer and a dedicated triathlete who's competed in a whole laundry list of world-renowned triathlons. Brian competed in the Kona World Championship Ironman after only 3 years. He's a trained MMA fighter and has competed in the octagon. Brian achieves this on a 100% raw vegan, lectin-free diet, eating just 10 food items. Let me repeat this. Brian eats only 10 food items. He hasn't had a cold or virus in 17 years. He's beaten chronic and debilitating gout without the use of prescription drugs. He is caffeine-free, alcohol-free, and drug-free. Wow, Brian. You have quite the accolades, and I'm really excited to dig into our conversation today. And very quickly, for all of you freedom hackers out there, if you like what you're hearing today, make sure to hit the subscribe button. That way you'll have access to all the valuable videos that we provide here at Freedom Hack Radio. And it also helps put the word out so that we can help more people achieve the freedom trinity of financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom, so that people can grow and maintain balance with financial health, wealth, relationships, spirituality, and having fun. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, then make sure to leave a review. So thanks, Brian. I love the way you show up in life. You're an all-out 110% effort kind of guy, and I love that about you. Thanks for joining me, mate.
Thanks for having me, Bryce. Excited to be here and to share some information with people.
Awesome. So today, you and I, Brian, we're going to dig really deep on health. And before we go there, I've got a really important question for you, mate. I'm really dying to know what's given you the most gratitude today.
I'd have to say just my health, really. Just waking up, having energy, in life itself. But if I would say my health. I feel very healthy. I'm 48 now, and I'm literally in the best fitness of my entire life. My weight's better than when I was in high school. And, even when I competed in high school sports or college sports or, at my peak levels of triathlon, I feel right now today I'm healthier and in better fitness than when I was 25 or 35. And I feel like I've still got a long way to go before I peak out. So I'm super gracious for my health and just being alive, just being able to breathe.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, there's so many people out there that blame their health circumstances on age. Oh, I'm getting old. And then here's you with a completely different mindset and philosophy of, the older you're getting, the better shape you're in. And, I'm looking at you right now and you are in like a really good sort of body fat ratio. I can tell that. And I'm super keen to dig into a lot of the specifics of all of this soon. But before we do that, there's something I want to share with our listeners about some gratitude that I have for you, brother. And, you've been a really positive impact on my wife, Tiffany, and I. And this all started back in the LBC in Long Beach when Tiffany was working for you at Matrix Business Capital. And you not only are running a very successful business, but you're also infusing self-development with your employees. And so, Tiffany came home one day and she said, hey, I've got this CD that Brian wants us to listen to. And it's supposed to be really cool. So she played it on and she put it on. She was in the kitchen, she's cooking. And I'm in the room and I think I was like trying to figure out how to make money in the stock market. And I'm listening to this dude. He's like got a Southern accent and he kind of sounds like some sort of religious preacher or something like that. And I'm like, what's Tiff listening to? So I went out there and I'm like, what are you listening to, Tiff? She's like, oh, it's really, really awesome. You got to check it out. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to dig this. It doesn't sound like it's something I'd be into. She's like, just give it a shot. Just give it 20 minutes. So I sat there with her and I listened to it for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, like this is pretty good. This is pretty awesome. And it was our friend, Jim Rohn, who I'd never heard of at the time. But for those of you who don't know, Jim Rohn is no longer with us, but he was one of the largest sort of self-development and, philosophy on life kind of guys. And Tony Robbins actually worked underneath him. And that's where Tony Robbins got his start in sales and sort of expanding in his career. But yeah, we learned a lot from Jim Rohn, and that just opened up this whole world of self-development for us. And, we just ate it up like a caterpillar eating leaves. We couldn't get enough of it. And that progressed us to go through to T. Harv Eker and Peak Potentials. We were with those guys for a couple of years. And I know you did a lot of training with T. Harv Eker as well. And, super stoked to fast forward. And then, my mates and I, the real estate mates, we wrote a book, 10,000 Miles to the American Dream. It came out last year. And we were lucky enough to have T. Harv Eker endorse the book. And so we kind of came full circle on that one. And so, it's really, really, really changed my life, this path that you've opened up for us. And I do want to throw in there that when I ran my first marathon, you were the one that inspired me, brother. And you were the one that helped me train. And, I did my 20K run with you, and it was 20-mile run with you, and it was awesome, man. And you've been a great inspiration. I love hanging out with you. I love having you in my life, and I'm really excited to dig into things here today.
Awesome, thanks, Bryce. And yeah, that Jim Rohn program, The Art of Exceptional Living. Yeah, Jim Rohn, in my opinion, he's like the grandfather of personal development. And that also inspired me. And since then, it's been, Peak Potentials, all of Tony Robbins' work, all of Landmark Education. And it's just really taken me down a path. But when I was in a career change leaving Texas, and a friend handed me that program, and I listened to it on the road trip back from Texas. And, he talks about being a health nut. And it's just a lot of common sense stuff. It's a lot of stuff that you kind of know, but it just reminds you and gets you, it brings you in that right direction. So that was just a powerful program for me personally. And, I listen to it at least once a year, and it just gets me back on track. So I appreciate your acknowledgement. Thank you.
Sure, man. Yeah, I mean, Jim Rohn's the real deal too, man. We love him. So, you've been on your own path of really accelerated personal growth. And you've had massive shifts and massive growth in your life. So can you quickly walk through, how you went from college to being a successful entrepreneur and competing in, world championship Ironman competitions?
Yeah, started in high school, really. Wrestling was my life. It was my, ticket out at that time. I just knew, hey, I'm going to go wrestle in college. And so, as I graduated, I did really well in high school wrestling, and had opportunities to, for scholarship at different schools for wrestling, Division I, but wrestling was my life at the time. So I ended up going to ASU. They had just won the nationals. They were the best team in the nation. First team to actually win the nationals, West Coast wrestling team. And I walked on there. And then after about a year, I just, I realized that taking the scholarship and being in California is what I wanted to do. So I, transitioned back to Cal Poly, where I finished out, my other 4 years. I got out of college and didn't really know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to go to law school because, I could make money. So I took the LSAT and, moved down to Southern California and was just waiting to start law school. And I started seeing all these incomes in the newspaper where you could make a six-figure income. And that's what I really wanted. At the time when I graduated college, it was like, if you could make $30,000 a year, that'd be great. And so I wanted to do more than that. So I was going to go to law school, but then while, I was doing a lab job at a vitamin company, testing, waiting to go to law school. And I took a sales job and, because I saw six-figure incomes, and I ended up with a telecommunications company. Someone advised me to get with a Fortune 500 company, get some good training. And, during college, I didn't know what sales was. But after graduating college, my degree was in social science. I thought, hey, I'll do this. So I got into sales and I was really competitive. I liked the product at the time. And I was with a Fortune 200 company. And, I've got strong work ethic. And, I think just from being competitive, I ended up being, a top person in sales. And that ended up being my career path for a while. Out of 800.
You were the top person in sales at that Fortune 200 company, yeah?
Yeah, it was actually, you guys have probably heard of Frontier Communications now. They've gotten really big. Back then they were a little smaller when AT&T, MCI, and Sprint were like the big three. And we were competing, taking that market share. But yeah, out of 800 reps nationally, I was always one or two.
Mm-hmm.
There's always, every now and then someone will get lucky and get ahead of me, but I was always in the one or two positions. And then that kind of led me to a position out in Texas to run a telecom company for a nutritional company that's out there that wanted to distribute telecom through their network of distributors. And so then I was flying all over the U.S. and Canada, speaking, main stage, talking to people about, getting on the service. And about that time, 5 years into telecom out of college, the industry completely shifted. MCI, WorldCom, at first a couple of the companies went bankrupt that I'd spent about 2 years building up my, a network in. And so then I got with MCI WorldCom and spent another year, and then they went belly up. And really that whole industry shifted. So I was looking for an industry change. I was living in Texas. I had moved out to Texas for that from Los Angeles. And so 5 years into it, I looked around for a new industry and found equipment financing where I am now. I wanted something where I could make a multiple six-figure income. The telecom wasn't doing it. And that's when I got the Jim Rohn CDs, drove out to California. Once I got out here, a friend told me about Landmark Education. And so I started doing seminar work. And that led me to Peak Potentials. And, then I bought their whole package. And, for the next 5 years, I was doing all these seminars on the weekends. But, I think the biggest thing is I lost my health in that process. When I was in college, I was always cutting weight. I wrestled 177s. My senior year, I wrestled heavyweights, and I was eating meat. In fact, I would wake up at 1 a.m. and eat a big steak and go back to bed. And, I weighed about 225 pounds. It was good, but eventually it caught up to me. And, I was drinking a lot of alcohol. When I was in sales, it was drinking a lot of coffee. And, I got to a phase where, all of a sudden one day I was set to have a record weekend selling. And I got a cold and I lost my my voice and I couldn't speak. And so where I was supposed to, you know, bring in 20 deals that week, which would have been phenomenal. You know, I ended up bringing in like 3. And then by Thursday, I went home because I couldn't vocalize, you know, and I do all my selling on a headset. And I just went into a lot of research, like 90 days of research on health, and said, you know, I don't want to get a cold again. I got to strengthen my immune system. And so that was the first one. And at the tail end of those 90 days, you know, I did everything from the zone, the 24-hour diet, which that led me to the Tony Robbins, because I heard he had one day on health. But I'd read probably 30 or 40 different books, everything that Barnes and Noble's had on the shelf, you know, what people that have cancer do for health, what people that, you know, had AIDS, you know, all these different things. You know, I'm going to strengthen my immune system. And the last book I read was, you know, by David Wolf. I was getting colonics and doing acupuncture and doing everything I could to bring my health up. And I weighed about 235 pounds now. And it wasn't muscle. So, you know, 5 years of being out of college, drinking beers, I was, you know, and I didn't even want to take my shirt off anymore. You know, and then I got cold, and you know, every year I'd get the flu, or I'd get a cold, or you know, I'd have issues. And so I just got tired of it. And so I you know, when I had to go home and I couldn't even do what I wanted to do, I said, there's no freedom in this. You know, I need to get my health on track. Otherwise, you know, what's it going to look like in 20 years if it's this bad already, you know? And I was, you know, 28 at the time. So I, you know, the last thing when I was getting a colonic, this lady's like, hey, you know, have you read, you know, have you heard about the raw food diet? And I'm like, no, what's that? And she's like, yeah, people are getting rid of their pots and pans and getting rid of the microwave. And, you know, she told me about these athletes and these, you know, models and, you know, a lot of famous people that were on the diet. And so I went to the, you know, Mother's Market, the health food store, and bought the book. First book I read cover to cover. You know, it was a Friday afternoon. I just started reading this book, and there was little 3-4 page chapters, and they all ended with cooked food is poison. And so I read this book. I woke up the next morning and finished it in less than 24 hours. And man, I was inspired. So I made the shift right then. Went 100% raw foods for about 90 days. In that process, I dropped, you know, 40 pounds in 45 days. I went from 235 to 195. My mom saw me about a month later and went into tears, thought like, wow, you know, you look 10 years younger. I could hear better. My typing speed literally doubled, and I'm typing on the computer every day. So that means more income. And I just felt really great. I'd been doing this little 3-mile run on the beach. It was taking me 24 minutes. I shaved 8 minutes off that in 1 week just from the diet shift. And the biggest thing at that time, because I was, you know, drinking and partying and, you know, I was living on the wild side, you know, I thought, man, you know, I'm probably going to have a disease, you know, like if anybody's going to get AIDS, I'm probably the guy, you know, who'd probably have something like that. And so, you know, or cancer, that's horrible. I always had all these concerns about disease. And somehow when I finished that book, my belief shifted. And then all of a sudden it was like, you know, I'm disease proof. You know, disease isn't going to happen for me. All of a sudden cancer didn't exist. All these diseases disappeared from my world. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And, you know, I just had a really good experience. And, you know, I can tell you 90 days into that, I had, you know, memories of a hamburger and, you know, and tried one. You know, but immediately I felt my energy levels drop, and you know, and I purged. You know, I didn't want to have this stuff in. So, you know, from that point forward, I was committed. I knew, you know, being on a raw diet was the way to go, but I struggled with it. You know, and I'd have breakdowns and times where I'd eat other foods, and it would be like 3 weeks good, 1 week off. But nevertheless, I stayed about 195. I was healthy. And from that point forward, I never got another cold. I haven't had a flu, haven't had any viruses. And, you know, and that's kind of what led me to triathlon. I'm like, wow, I got to test drive this energy, so I did a little triathlon locally, and that was pretty exciting, and I thought I could have done better. And then I got hooked, and then a year later I'm doing an Ironman. I did my first Ironman.
After a year, after 1 year, you went from doing your first small triathlon to doing an Ironman in 12 months.
That's right. And I remember training for that Ironman. I was so afraid of failing or not doing it, because it's the 2.4 mile swim and the 112 mile bike, and then you run a marathon, and I recently did a marathon, and that was tough enough. It took me like over 5 hours, and I was suffering because I really wasn't ready for that marathon. And so I thought, how am I going to do this? The thought of being out there and just moving your body for 12 hours nonstop. And so leading up to that, for like 2 months prior to that, every Saturday I did an Ironman. I got up, and at 6 in the morning I swam, the 2.4 miles, and then I got on my bike and I read 112 miles, and then I ran the marathon, and I get done about 10 o'clock at night. And I just did that to get my confidence up, and then and I finished the Ironman. And
so you did this. So let's just stop and talk about this for a second. So a lot of people, and I know even when I was training for my marathon, the first marathon, was I wanted to train to about 80% of what I was going to do on race day. And then on race day, it was going to be the longest that I had ever run ever, So I kind of like, I suppose, essentially undertrained. And then I left it all the rest of the energy for the big day so I could perform, because I didn't want to overtrain. And that was part of the quick training program that I did, because my training, I think it was like 3 months or something like that. It was a short training program. But you, on the flip side, and I think this is kind of like a good metaphor or example of how you do life. You were like, I'm going to do the race every Saturday for like 8 to 10 weeks before the race, just to know that I can absolutely crush it. And so you were competing by yourself in an Ironman competition every week on Saturday for like 8 to 10 weeks. And I just think that's like awesome. Most people don't have that kind of like mindset. And I suppose that's how pro athletes train. That's how, people at the top leagues of NFL train. They train harder than what they actually play on game day. And so, yeah, that's awesome, man. And that was all self-inspired too. You didn't have like 100 people doing that with you. It was Brian.
Yeah. And, my training's evolved. Now I lean more towards, under training and putting more on the race day. But, that was before I really knew what I was doing. I just wanted the confidence to get it done. So,
yeah.
So that was that. And I think another thing that just kind of led me to triathlon, I was doing MMA at the time, and, I wanted a fun way to do my conditioning. And so that was another thing that kind of inspired me. I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll race, I'll get to run, bike, and swim, and it'll be fun. And, at that time I was really just training to get better at MMA. And, and then I ended up going out to Kona. And when I did that race,
which for listeners here, Kona is the world championship Ironman competition in Hawaii, and you have to compete at a high level. You have to qualify to get in it and prove that you can get certain timelines, which is very, very extremely competitive timelines to get in. So just to set that pace for the listeners. Yeah,
and Kona was the world championships, and that was exciting too, because I had done some Ironman, but when you say bring that up, there's this certain portion of people that will be like, oh, you mean the one in Hawaii? And I'd be like, well, no. So I was really excited when I was able to go out to Hawaii and do the Kona Ironman. And then when I got out there and I saw people competing, I just mentally shifted and said, hey, I'm going to be a triathlete, and so now, I've done 11 of them. And now I've taken a step back. The past 2 years, I've just been really working on my breathing and working on my pace. And, I've changed a lot. So that I can go back and compete. So I really haven't been competing in the past 2 years, but next year I'm going to hit it again, and I believe I'll go to a whole nother level. And since 195, I've dropped to 165. And so now I'll be competing at 165. And Yeah, so I'm pretty excited in January to get back out there and start racing. I've just really evolved a lot in the past 2 years, and it's exciting, and it's been really cool just kind of training on my own and being able to really progress at a level I couldn't do it when I was training with lots of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you were talking about being in college and being a fighter, like you're a wrestling Hall of Famer, yeah?
Well, at in my at my high school, they just had their 50-year anniversary, and I made the golden team, and so I was recognized for one of the so I'm on the wrestling legends wall, and they recognized me as the second best wrestler in the high school's 50 years of history. And
That's
that was
cool.
this past year. So they sent me some shirts and posters, and that was kind of neat.
That's awesome. And that was quite a while ago when you were in high school, and then you progressed from there in MMA, and you got in the octagon and you did some cage fighting, and I've seen you cage fighting, and it's very impressive. And then what, you and I were talking the other day, you just recently been in an MMA fight. How did that go? What was that like at
Oh,
48 years of age?
oh yeah, no, I got back out and trained, which was really cool. I'd been really missing it, and about 3 years ago, I got on the mat for a day, and it went pretty well. Prior to that was 3 years, so effectively, it was like 6 years since I've been on the mat or did any kind of grappling type training. And I went in and I was training with some guys that are, they're training for fights, and they're doing this, every day on a pretty regular basis. They're competitive professional MMA fighters. We did an hour boxing and then an hour of submission wrestling. In fact, the past 2 weeks I've been healing up from that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I went a little too hard probably, but I did really well. I held my own. I only got taken down one time, and I submitted a lot of people, so it felt good knowing that I could jump on the mats after really not being on the mats in like 6 years and compete at that level. My endurance was better than it's ever been based on some of the changes and things I've been doing over the past 2 years, and the nasal breathing. And so but it was pretty awesome. I'm gonna keep going. I'm going tomorrow. I'll probably just go once a week, but to mix up my training.
Beautiful. And, I was listening to George St. Pierre lately, and he's talking about how, so many people think that he's like this ultra like confident guy, but he says like he is so scared going into a fight. His pre-fight psychology is like he is full of fear. And he doesn't even know how to explain to people how scary that is. And I just thought that was really interesting and really authentic of him to share that, because obviously when he goes in there, he does what he needs to do. And he's a champion for a reason, but he's being honest on what it's like psychologically, trying to let people know, hey, it's not that the fear isn't there. It's just he knows how to kind of handle it and not let it overcome him and not allow it to control him. So, I got a question for you when it comes to like getting in an MMA fight, or whether it comes into competing in a world championship Ironman competition. Like, what's your pre-game mentality like? I mean, have you got like butterflies and fear going through your mind, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference for me mentally, when I did a cage fight, than an Ironman. And with the cage fights, and I even question if I should I be doing this, because I get so nervous, I'd be training MMA just for fitness, and then they'd be like, hey, you want to fight? And, I wouldn't want to say no. So I'd be like, sure. And then I'm enrolling all my families and friends, and they're going to be there to watch. And, I'm not, it's not like in college where you fight, you're at a bar fighting some, person who's maybe, been drinking, and, now I'm going to fight someone who's been training, and, they're getting ready. And, the ones I did were, it was before it was actually legal in California. So they were underground, and, one of them was the bare knuckle bloodbath. And, so there was no rules, no doctors. So you had kind of the crime factor in the background, where not only are you got to, win this fight, and you don't want to lose the fight because, you're going to get your butt kicked. so I'd have these butterflies for like 7 days, totally stressed out, and be like, I'm never doing this again, and then once you get in, the adrenaline kicks in. And the reality is, in my opinion, like you're doing fights every day. So like the practices, I think are harder than the actual, when you get in the octagon, and you have this one fight against one person, but then, so I'm like, I wonder if I should do this. I get so nervous, maybe it's not normal. And then Quentin Rampage Jackson was actually in my office one day, and, I asked him, I said, hey, do you get nervous? That was my question I had for him. And he said, oh yeah, man, I always get nervous before every fight. And, one time I didn't get nervous and I got my butt kicked. So now I get nervous if I'm not nervous. And so I thought, okay, it's normal to be nervous. And I think that's the fight or flight. I think that's what gets you prepared. If you're not nervous, you're in trouble. With the Ironman, I think it's just more like the nervousness leading up to it, just causes you to train. Now, since then, I've done so many of them, and I've got a lot more experience. I've even, because of my diet, I've tested some where I did a full Ironman one time. I went 6 months with no training and just showed up at the start line. I jumped in and did the swim, and that was my first swim in 6 months. I did my bike. That was my first time on a bike in 6 months. So I have done, one Ironman that I call it off the couch. I had to go a little slower, and, I didn't have my best time, but through pacing, I was able to get through that. And, it wasn't my intention not to train. I battled with gout, and, I had some gout episodes that kept me from training. But that was probably one of my best experiences. Sometimes when you have to do a big event like that with less training, it's a completely different experience than when you go into an event like that and you're completely trained and prepared and ready.
So it sounds like that having fear is like a normal thing, and it probably lets us know that we're on the growth edge. It's an opportunity for us to grow a little bit more, which is awesome, right? And this can happen in business. It could happen with our fitness. It could happen in relationship. We're getting nervous and butterflies. And from what I've heard from successful people is kind of a common theme that they need to be in a reality check and not be so overconfident that they don't get a little bit nervous, because that's when like most fighters lose. You said Rampage Jackson has had that. St. George Pierre had the same experience. So many other fighters have had the same experience. But then you don't want to be too confident and just think, hey, I've totally got this. This is going to be a breeze. Because if you had have done that off the couch and just gone, hey man, like I've done so many of these Ironman competitions, I'm just going to crush this thing. I don't even need to train. You probably would have just shot yourself in the foot. Yeah.
This is true. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think you got to be humble, and, you got to be prepared for, I think, everything, you do in life. You got to, every day, and, every moment matters. And so I think focusing and being prepared and, and giving 100%, I think that's, truly the one of the keys to happiness I found is if you give 100% of yourself, you're always going to be, you'll be satisfied. You're like, hey, I gave 100%. I could get great results. And if I don't give 100%, I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm not going to be happy.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's not necessarily about, competing against other people. It's competing against ourselves, isn't it? And we're the only ones that know the truth. We might have came first that day, or we might have came 10th that day. But when we came 10th, that might have been our better performance than when we came first. And that's more important to us. Yeah, that's super powerful. So you went from gout and inflammation to perfect health, no sickness for over 17 years. How is this possible?
Yeah. Now the gout took a little longer. I got on the raw food diet back in 2003, and it's been a struggle figuring out how to be on that diet and not have the cravings and not have the struggles. But in that process, I went down a path like I think a lot of people that eat vegan and stuff they do, where they're eating vegan, but it's not necessarily healthy. Mm-hmm. And I kept getting gout, and I got it for the first time when I was about 33, which is, I don't know, maybe 17 or I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or,
Mm-hmm.
but when gout's pretty brutal, my toe inflamed. I thought I kicked something. And then, for a week I was down. It would hit me like 4 or 5 times a year. The last time it went for 3 weeks. It went from my right ankle to my left ankle to both ankles. Literally I was crutching around. I felt like the guy in Misery, with both ankles taken
Yeah.
out. And a doctor turned me on to something called prednisone, which it's technically a steroid, but a lot of people use it to fight inflammation and different things. And so with the prednisone, I could take, 20 milligrams, 3 of those, about 60 milligrams, and it would knock the gout out. And so for about 10 years, I would three or 4 times a year, if I felt the gout coming on, I'd take the prednisone. But the issue was, eventually the prednisone starts to have a negative effect, and you have to take more of it. And it would all of a sudden I'd feel like I was losing my mind. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And it was really hard to, and it got to a point where it was like, what's the lesser of the evils? If I take the prednisone, I'm going to lose my mind, or do I ride the gout out? And so about 2 years ago, I got a big gout flare up, and I said, I'm not going to take the prednisone anymore, because when I took the prednisone, then all of a sudden I couldn't concentrate at the office or work. And so I stayed at my house, and I didn't take the prednisone, and I had 4 major flare-ups that lasted a little over 6 weeks. My right foot and ankle went away, and then I was going around on an eye crutch kind of thing. And then I left my left leg, and so then I was in a wheelchair. And then it hit my right finger, or my middle finger on my right hand, and it hit my knee. I was crawling around my knees, and then it got in my knee too. And then it was on my hand, so like it was hard to, so it was crazy. And when you're going through that, it's about a 2-week period for each flare-up. And then there's about 2 days where, you just want to be dead. You're screaming, and it's just brutal. Like it's sending shockwaves of pain right up through your brain. And you feel like a heartbeat in your forehead. And, if somebody was outside my apartment door, they'd just hear me screaming profanities, and, going through about an 8-hour window of like literally wanting to pass out from shock. And, it was brutal. And I had the prednisone on the coffee table next to me, and, I knew I could take that and just eliminate this pain, but I went with it, and I couldn't go to work I tried to go to work, but it got so brutal that, the people at work were like, just stay home. We don't want to see this. And so I stayed home, which was a really cool experience. I wheelchair proofed my house. I got 6 weeks of actually living in a wheelchair, and, you start becoming aware of places that aren't handicap proof. And, I got to experience what it's like. I've always seen people in chairs, but I didn't know what it was like. So I got to go into their world. So that was cool. But
was that a massive moment of gratitude for you when you experienced like, man, what would my life be like if I'm a triathlete, and what would it be like if I was in a wheelchair? I'm sure there was a lot of gratitude you had.
Oh, absolutely. So I got a lot of appreciation just for life and being healthy, and compassion for people that have to spend their life in wheelchairs. But so that was a good experience just in itself. I was kind of excited to go there, that place. But the biggest thing is I didn't want to have to take this prednisone ever again. And so I was reading and studying, and this is where I had my biggest breakthroughs. And when I came out of that, that's all I did, for 6 weeks, is I just studied, like, how do I beat inflammation? I read all these books on like the 27 diseases that kill people, and how do you beat them? And, all the minerals and vitamins and nutrients that the human body needs according to science, and I found ways to get them through raw foods. The biggest thing I found out is that, fried foods and sugars were bringing on a lot of inflammation and gout. And so I totally cut fruit out of my diet. I went on a lectin, I cut all the lectins out of my diet. And I just, I want to take a little pause on that. I was getting my hair cut one day, and I thought I knew everything. I thought eating fruits and vegetables are good. As long as it's a fruit or vegetable, you're good. And I just ate all that stuff. But I was 195 pounds, and, I thought it was working, but I was still having gout issues. And then my hairstylist at the time was reading a book, and, she had a book on her shelf called The Plant Paradox. And I'm like, what's that? And she's like, yeah, not all plants are good. Some of them are toxic and you shouldn't eat them. So I thought, I better read that. So it's Dr. Gundry, and, he's a heart surgeon, and, he's got the world record for species to species heart transplant. He took the heart of a pig and put it in a baboon and got it to survive like 6 weeks. So, there's a lot of instruments used in heart surgery that he's, created. And now, now they call him no more Mr. Knife Guy, because he's not even doing heart surgery anymore, because he had some patients where they were too ill. They wouldn't have survived the heart surgeries. So he had to find a natural way, to heal them. And through this diet of cutting lectins, they survived, and everything was good. And then all of a sudden, he starts healing all these different people with it. And so that's all he does. So I read his book, and it made sense. Lectins, gluten is the world, it's the most famous lectin. Everybody's heard of glutens. But what I didn't know is the reason you want to eliminate lectins is because lectins destroy your gut biome. And the secret to health, in my opinion, is the gut biome.
Yeah.
And when in training, in studying to become a top athlete, and because I want to go back out to Kona, that's one of my goals, and actually win or do really well there.
Yeah.
Win if I'm really honest about things. And for my age group, I started reading, like Dr. Phil Maffleton, where he starts, these people, they say, like, you can, if you believe kale is good for you, and it's healthy, you can eat lots of kale, but if your gut biome isn't correct, you're not going to digest those foods. So you got to get your gut biome right. And so the thing with lectins, there's a lot of these plants, and they have lectins. There's a lot of foods that have lectins. And what they do is they mess up your gut biome, and you rely on that for your digestion and to get the nutrition you need. So the bottom line is, Dr. Gundry had a yes list and a no list, and I just followed it. And I was 195 when I first went through that book, and I wasn't trying to lose weight. I didn't think I was overweight. And once I cut the lectins out, in a 90-day window, I dropped 30 pounds. I went to 165, and then I got to 160, and then I was still trying to beat the gout at that time. And so I started experimenting with some water fasting, and I did some 8-day water fast. I got all the way down to 150, which I hadn't been at 150 since my freshman year in high school. Okay. I didn't think it was physiologically possible to get there. But I got there, and then now I've put some weight on. Now I'm 165. But my point is, so I cut the lectins out, which means, I got rid of a lot of fruits. I cut tomatoes and bell peppers. I cut cashews and peanuts. There was just a lot of, I stopped drinking kombuchas. I was drinking lots of kombuchas, but it's fermented. So I got rid of the sugar. I got rid of the fried food. I got rid of the lectins. And I got to 165, and I'm like, wow, I feel amazing. Long story short, I was working with two of the top rheumatologists, a naturopath, a top sports podiatrist, blood testing, all this stuff. So 6 weeks in the wheelchair, I come out of the wheelchair, and I had, I looked up every vitamin, every mineral, essential fatty acids that, that are on the top multivitamins that science says you should have. And I found natural ways to get those vitamins, minerals, and supplements through raw foods, and so I have this big list, and then I narrowed it down to my favorites. And, I always told people, like, because people say, oh, you're on a raw food diet. They're always trying to say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And the reality is, like, I'm just trying to make it real simple. Like, I always tell people, like, if I had it my way, I would just pull my energy from the sun. I'd do sun and water like a plant. I haven't figured that out yet, but I have got it down to just 10 foods, and I feel great. It's simple. I eat one meal a day, and I eat those 10 foods, and, I haven't had a gout flare as a result of this, being on this diet, and the exercise. So I no longer, need the prednisone. And, now I just feel like, I'm at a whole nother level. My training's going to a whole nother level. I did the MMA, 2 weeks ago, not being on a mat in 3 years, and before that 3 years. And, just had great results. So,
that's awesome. And so, like, when my wife first met you and you were introduced into our lives, she came back and she's like, oh yeah, my boss Brian, he's got this, he competes in Ironman competitions, and he's like super fit, and he's like, ex-MMA fighter and all this kind of stuff. And he's doing it all at the time you were juicing, and you were just like juicing, and that was literally what you're doing. And I'm like, no, there's no way that someone could actually compete in all of these competitions and have such high success and be at such peak performance and just literally be like drinking juice. Like, you weren't even like eating solid foods or anything like that at the time. And then I met you, and then I went to your house and I saw it, and I'm like, this is like legit. This is so true. And it's like, I didn't know. It was kind of like I had blinders on, and, because we're told that, you have to eat steak and you have to eat this, and, the food pyramid and all this kind of stuff, which we now know is BS. And then, there's different levels of it. And at the time, I just thought, like, that's such an extreme, level of, like, how could you possibly perform and like have the energy to train? Because it's not just about you going in these Ironman competitions, going in these triathlon competitions. Your training schedule is hardcore, and you're like training for like sometimes hours and hours a day, like every day, over and over again, over and over. So you've got to have like energy to perform. And I'm just like, wow, man, like, how does this guy do this? And then now you've gone even further, and now you're off the juicing diet and you're onto like just 10 ingredients. So I think it'll probably blow people's minds that this is possible. And I would ask all of our listeners and viewers right now to open up your mind to understand that there's athletes out there doing really, really, really big things on all of these. We don't need like protein shakes and all of the products and everything and all the chemicals and things that are being sold to us. We can do it naturally. And now you're on like 10 simple ingredients. So do you want to tell us what those 10 ingredients are?
Yeah. And it was interesting. I was reading like a memory from Facebook, like a post I did 3 years ago, where I was so into the juicing and the kombuchas and eating the gels. And that was part of it. When I do the triathlon, you have to eat all those gels. I think one of the hardest part about an Ironman is having to eat all those gels all day and getting sick of the sugar. So like, so I started studying ways to be in a ketonic state and, burning ketones. And, so now I run a marathon, and I don't have to drink or take nutrition, the entire time. I've just
for an entire marathon. You don't have to, through the portion of the marathon, you don't have to have nutrition.
Right. I just, I run at a lower heart rate, and, that's kind of what I've been working on. Because that's the other thing when, my training now, it's either super intense or it's at a lower heart rate. So I'm just more in a fat burning zone. And that keeps me from burning, glucose, which can also throw off the diet. But to get into the 10 foods, and all the things I used to juice and put in smoothies now, I just try to eat them all raw. But I eat the same meal every day, and I'm super excited. I look forward to that meal. And sometimes people say, oh, that takes so much discipline, all that. But really it didn't. It takes like 10 days, and then another 10 days, and another 10 days. And then all of a sudden, you feel differently. You don't want the other things. I went from craving sweet things to now I crave bitter and sour, like, raw kale. So, what I do is, you know, and I used to do celery juice. Now I just eat the celery.
Mm-hmm.
I used to juice kale and turmeric and, you know, ginger. And now I eat it, you know, raw and whole. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, I start off with water and I squeeze a lemon in it.
Mm-hmm.
And a raw organic, everything I eat is raw and organic.
Mm-hmm.
And I drink that. And so I get a bunch of vitamin C that way. And by infusing the vitamin C in my diet, it keeps my body from overproducing uric acid. You know, and I read this book about, you know, Captain Cook, how they made it overseas to the New World. They were losing everybody to scurvy.
Yeah.
The minute they started drinking lemon juice, it solved everything. I thought, wow, lemon juice is powerful. And before I went to lemon juice, I was looking at 1,000, you know, milligrams of liposomal vitamin C. You know, I was studying every vitamin C product you could get. You know, and I now believe I did this book Whole that explains that supplements, you know, aren't as good. It's better to get your nutrients from whole foods.
Yeah.
Your body assimilates them better, and you actually get more from it.
Yep.
So that's how I get my vitamin C. That's how I start.
Yep.
Then I go into, I eat turmeric root, you know, and again, I took turmeric pills. I used to juice it. Now I just eat the root. It tastes like a peppery carrot. I really enjoy it. Then I move on and I eat ginger. Now, ginger was a little tough just to chew it up. So I chop it up small and, you know, I put it in there. I just kind of drink it down like I'm taking pills. I just don't enjoy chewing ginger.
So you cut it up into like tiny pieces and then just sort of down it as if you
put it in my mouth and then drink it with the water. That's the ginger. And then the garlic, I really like garlic. And and I do the turmeric because it's just very anti-inflammatory and there's a lot of powerful reasons for turmeric.
Yep.
Ginger, I just you know, I know it's real healing and, you know, I just wanted to have it in my diet. So I do the ginger. The garlic, I do garlic. I chop that up really quick. I get a clove of, you know, I chop it up, put it in my mouth. I like having the garlic in my mouth. I don't like to necessarily chew a whole garlic clove, but then I'll wash that down. Then I move on from the garlic and I've recently added carrots. So I get the raw carrots that look like they just pulled them out of the ground. I have to wash the dirt off them when I get them. And then I eat one whole carrot. And then after the carrot, I eat celery. I eat about four stalks, about 8-inch long stalks of celery. So I'm not juicing it. I just eat the celery. And celery also is anti-inflammatory. The carrot, there's a lot of good things to do with carrot, but it has the beta carotenes and, you know, there's a lot of good, and the carrot is also good with the chewing too, because, you know, chewing's real important. I think people don't use their teeth or chew enough. So with the carrot and the celery, I get to put my teeth to work and, you know, chew, and I just enjoy the crunchy and you know, the crispness.
And we're getting all the fibers too when we're chewing it. You know, we're getting those fibers as opposed to juicing. Yeah. Yeah,
and I consciously chew it really small, so when it goes in, and then, you know, I'm lectin free, so I digest it really well. Now, once I get done with the carrot, I move on to kale. And when I first started, I hated kale, and I couldn't drink, you know, it's like kale juice. I had to put apple, all kinds of things in it. Now I love kale.
Yeah.
If I want to have fun and I go, you know, I'll just drink straight kale juice. But what I do is I just eat the kale like I'm eating potato chips.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy the crunchy, bitter taste of kale. I crave it. I've shifted that. It's one of my favorite parts of the meal. And then as soon as I'm done with the kale, I move on to avocado. And avocado is probably the staple in the diet. Tons of potassium, magnesium, vitamin B's, there, you know, all kinds of good stuff in avocado. Yeah, good fats. And so when I eat the avocado, I cut it up. I sprinkle a lot of Himalayan sea salt on it.
Yeah.
And then I cut it up into like 8 pieces and I wrap it in nori wraps. And that's where I get my iodine. And then I eat it kind of like sushi, but without, you know, just avocado pieces of sushi.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the avocado. And then when I'm done with the avocado, I have added blueberries into my diet recently.
Okay.
That's the only fruit that I'm currently eating. And I go through about four pints a week. So I eat about a half a pint each time I eat. So I about two big handfuls of blueberries. Just enjoy it. It's flavorful. There's a lot of good benefits to blueberry. Now, once I'm done with the blueberries, and that's kind of like my treat, I move on to the nuts.
Yep.
And there's 3 nuts I eat.
Okay.
Brazil nuts. I get a lot of magnesium and selenium from the Brazil nuts. Help me sleep. Plus, they're really filling and they taste good. Then I move on to walnuts.
Yeah.
And walnuts are probably one of my top 3 things: kale, avocado, and walnuts, and the lemon juice, of course. But I do the walnuts, and the walnuts have a lot of omega-3s and 6s and 9s. And when you eat the walnuts, I found through research that it converts into DHA and EPA in your body. And so I get a lot of good fats from the walnuts. So I eat lots of walnuts.
And then are you getting your protein from these nuts as well?
Yeah, I believe I get enough protein, through the nuts, and then also through the through the kale. I think there's a lot of good stuff in kale.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's pretty, I always studied, like chimpanzees are like 98.8% same DNA as us.
Yeah.
When you look at their diets, or even a silverback gorilla, they're eating all, fruits and leaves, and they're pretty strong. And, I think they're getting plenty of, or even a thoroughbred racehorse. I know that's a little different, but, I even look at top athletes across the world, or top inventors, or very successful people, or business people. And, they're, Carl Lewis was a guy who was, was vegetarian and, hit a lot of top records, but the list goes on. So, but yeah, the nuts are good. Now, the last nut I do is macadamia nuts.
Yep.
And I just enjoy them. They taste good. There is a certain B vitamin that's in the macadamia nut that you're not getting from the avocado. And that's it, really. It's actually 11 items. I said it was 10, but if you count the nori wrap, I forgot to count it. Then it would be 11.
Okay.
And interestingly, I eat that same exact meal every day. And every day I'm excited to eat that meal. And it never changes, and it tastes amazing. And I don't feel like anything's missing. People always say, "Oh, are you hungry?" I'm never hungry. I found out what makes you hungry is when you lack nutrients. So a lot of people go around, and one of the reasons for the raw food diet, or the logic behind it, is when you cook your foods, you're killing 80% of the nutrients, and 100% of the enzymes. And so when you're eating your cooked food, you're not getting all the nutrients, and you're not digesting it as well. And so your body's always hungry. So you gotta constantly be eating, 1, 2, 3 meals a day. And this has been my experience. And you got to realize, there was a time in college, or high school, where I didn't eat any fruits or vegetables. I point at my canine and say, "Hey, I'm a meat eater. All I ate was meat." So I've done the all meat diet. I think the thing that's different is I've eaten the way most people have eaten. I've been to those worlds. I challenge, people don't understand this, but I don't think it's possible for someone to go 100% raw fruits and vegetables like I have for a 90-day window, get to that place where you feel the energy, and then go back and you start realizing. And I kind of use the analogy. It's kind of like if you're in I used to, in high school, I took a job in the meat market, cleaning the meat market. And the butcher shop, because it paid $1 more than the bag boy. And, so I go down there, and from 3 to 6, and it smells like meat unless you're in there. And so I say, like, you know, if you go in a stinky room, eventually you adjust and you don't realize how it is. And I think that's the same thing with diet. People get used to feeling a certain way. And my experience was, because when I was eating cooked foods, you know, I was in the same system. I wake up in the morning, I drink two pots of coffee at my peak, you know, because I'd be at work at 5 and I drink coffee, and then I get through my day and I'd start to phase. Then I'd need another state change. Then I'd get out of work and I'd have a beer, you know, and that leads to other things. And so I think cooked food ultimately leads to addiction and a lot of health issues. So what's really cool is by being on, you know, all raw fruits and vegetables and being lectin free, you know, I'm getting great results, and, you know, I'm able to compete at the highest level, and, you know, I don't worry about sickness. It's like really cool. This, you know, like I didn't know why I was doing it. Sometimes I'm like, why are you doing this? You know, just enjoy your life and stuff. And then when this pandemic came along, I saw like everybody's so concerned, and I'm like, wow, you know, they need to be concerned. And incidentally, you know, I'd been social distancing for the last 18 months for my own reasons. I was social distancing because when I ended up in the wheelchair, I said, I got to make some changes. You know, I'm going to be 50, you know, like I want the next 50 years of my life to be better than the last. So I found I had to get away from everybody. And so I trained alone. You know, I come to work, you know, I eat. I was able to figure out how I want to eat, how I want to train. There was no outside influences. I was able to find out who Brian is. And it's been the best thing that's happened to me. But when the pandemic came along, now all of a sudden I'm watching everybody's reaction, and I'm like, it's okay. I got excited when I thought everything was going to shut down. I'm like, all right, I'm going to survive off walnuts, lemon juice, and water for 6 months. This is going to be cool. You know, I was ready to do it. You know, I had it all figured out. You saw the challenge in there. So I hoarded walnuts and I hoarded lemon juice because I didn't think the lemons would keep if the refrigerators went down.
And everybody else is taking toilet paper, and you're getting walnuts and lemon juice.
Yeah. But my thing is, when this happened, I'm like, wow, you know, I'm glad I'm doing this because this is very real. There's a lot of people that have to worry about, you know, sickness and disease, and I just don't. Like, I think if everybody was in my state, there would be no pandemic. But the reality is people have to be worried because of everything they're doing. And I think the virus, it's just come along and put a flashlight on the world. And I know this because if I go to 7-Eleven, you know, they're going to stock up with what most of America wants. Mm-hmm. And if I walk into 7-Eleven, you know, there's only like 3 things I would possibly put in my body. You know, maybe the pistachio nuts. Yeah. Maybe the banana, but not anymore. And the alkaline water. But other than that, it's loaded with stuff that I would never put in my body, but most of America does. And so my thing is, I'm like, wow, this is the most powerful thing. You know, this has shut down the planet. And if people just knew how to eat, they, you know, so anyways.
And I think that that's really powerful too. And I know you and I had spoken about this intensively before, that, you know, when all of this stuff was going down, you know, we feel really good about our health because we're proactively being taking care of our immune systems already. We've also been taking care of ourselves financially as well, and putting ourselves in all of these positions where when things like this happen, we're already kind of like, we've already got these areas of our life taken care of. So we have control of that, and we don't have to have these outside influences that are going to take us out because, you know, we're strong, we're financially strong, we're strong in our relationships, we're strong in our health, we're strong spiritually. And we know how to have fun. And I was the same too. It's like, you know, I would prefer things to not be the way that they are, but given the way they are, like, we were ready for this kind of thing. And look, you know, there's some people that are out there that are just like, well, that's cool for you to say, but I wasn't ready. And so it's not enjoyable to not be ready. And like you said, it's an opportunity. It's like a flashlight is being shined on something. And it's like, wherever you are is where you're at. It is what it is. Don't worry about the past, and where are you at is where you're at. But now, knowing this, knowing that we can control our immune systems, knowing we can control our finances, like, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to just go, oh, well, and then continue on the same path that we've been on? it's an opportunity for us to change our trajectory. And so I think it's a lot of this, even though there is, you know, bad things happening to people, I also think it's opportunity disguised as something else. And it's opportunity for us to take better care of ourselves. It's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're living in the place that we want to live in. Because when people got locked down, they were like, some people were like, man, I don't actually really like where I live. And then some people were even deeper on that and like, I don't really like who I'm living with. And so it's a reality check on all of the things. Like, do we really have the best relationships really close to us? Do we really live where we want to live? Are we really taking care of ourselves? How are we doing financially? Are we really doing well? And, you know, it's a report card. And so, you know, I love that you're sharing this, because I've felt the same way. And I think the people who are actually being proactive about this are. So, you know, what can we do about it and how can we change? And I think that's great.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the biggest thing is just awareness that health really is a choice. You know, it's 100% an option. You know, the diseases and the problems that people get, like, I don't have any concerns about any diseases or illnesses right now. And, you know, I hear people say, oh, it's hereditary. You know, I think diets are hereditary. You know, people get the same diseases as people in their family because they eat the same way. But the reality is it's a choice, you know, and I've had friends where they're like, why are you eating so healthy? You're going to die anyways. And it's like, yeah, you know, I don't really care. I could die tomorrow. But you know what? The thing is, while I'm alive,
you feel good.
And while I'm on this planet, I want to be strong. I want to have the freedom to do what I want. You know, like Jim Rohn says, wouldn't it be tragic if the mind was willing, but the body was unable?
Yeah.
And, you know, I took that to heart. And it's like when I was trying to sell, I was great at sales. Everything was there. But without the health, there's no freedom. You know, and you hear about people that, you know, they have all the wealth, but then they get sick and they're gonna, you know, and then they'll give it all up just to have their health back.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say, you know, well, I just want to have fun and I like eating my chips and drinking my beer and all that kind of stuff. And look, hey, like maybe there's a part of some of those things that people are doing that does give them satisfaction. And if they weren't doing it and they were trying to be inauthentic with what they really wanted and they were doing something that they didn't really want to do, maybe there's a bit of like a negative mindset behind that as well, you know? And you want to say something on that?
Yeah, here's what I got to say about that. And this is the best part, because I've been there. I've been in situations. There was a time when I was driving around craving foods, you know, and it's being unhealthy that causes the cravings. And I figured out how to eliminate all the cravings. But, you know, I'd crave pizza or tacos or hamburgers or a steak or wine or beer. I wanted that stuff as much as anybody. But what's happened is I've shifted things to where, you know, pretty soon I'm driving around and, you know, at one point I was craving watermelons at the same level of intensity. Right now, I'm going to crave, you know, putting salt on my avocado and with the seaweed. And I believe I'm going to crave that at a higher level than somebody else is craving their potato chips. In fact, I know it for a fact. There's just a whole nother level of enjoyment that they're not getting to experience.
Yeah, it's just what are we craving and what are we obsessing about? We all obsess about something. Some of us obsess about having sex and drinking beer, and some of us obsess about fitness and growing our business or whatever, right? We all obsess. Just what are we obsessing about? And, you know, like you explained this before, and there is a transition period. Like you didn't go from like waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning eating steaks to just going to 10 food items. You did this over a long period of time, and you went through transitional periods where you're literally reprogramming and retraining your body. And in the beginning of each of those stages, I'm sure you went through, because I've gone through different stages and had this experience myself. For example, eating 3 times a day and then changing to eating like 2 times a day. Like, of course, for the first period, your body's going to go, what the heck's going on here? It's time to eat, man. Like, I'm hungry right now. And there's going to be that uncomfortable period for a few weeks, maybe 10 days, few weeks or something like that. And then you'll break through that barrier, and then it won't be so bad. And then 10 days later, a couple of weeks later, it'll get even better. And then before you know it, a few months later, you look back and you're like, you can't even remember what it was like to eat 3 times a day, or you can't even remember what it was like to eat steak, or you can't even remember because you've retrained your body. It's just our body is expecting certain things because it's habitually had that in the past, and it's programmed, hey, it's time to do this, it's time to sleep now, and all of this. But if we break our sleep patterns and we change our sleep patterns and we change our diet, our body in a pretty relatively short time, like weeks or months, reprograms itself and starts with a new normal. And it's kind of like what's happening right now. Like the new normal for people in life is to be locked down at home and to social distance and wear masks and stuff. And now that's normal for people. If you had have mentioned, 6 months ago at the end of last year, hey, you're going to be walking around in a mask and you're going to be locked in your house, people would go, there's no way I'm doing that. It sounds absurd. It's crazy. We can't possibly survive like that. But now people are doing it every day, so we can change. And what's your experience like that, Ben? I mean, obviously you're having little challenges along the way, but then you break through those challenges and it becomes easy. And then it becomes even better than that, becomes rewarding, doesn't it?
Yeah. And for me, it was a long process. At first it was like, moving, from white bread to brown bread to organic foods, and, shifting the grocery store to the health food store, and at first I was like a pescatarian, it was like, okay, I'm going to cut out certain meats and just have fish. And, and then I accomplished that and realized, the fish isn't serving me any well. Now I'm going to go to fruits and vegetables. Let me cut down to, it was a process over time. And I think it's interesting. Someone gave me a puppy as a gift one time, and I wasn't expecting the puppy, but I learned a lot over that next year. And when I was going out trying to figure out how to feed the puppy, all of a sudden, I was really concerned. I wanted to be healthy, so I was researching all the food. And, it led me to raw food. But in the process, I said, wow, you're lucky to be a dog because the food's all perfectly balanced. And, and then all of a sudden I was feeding my dog better than myself. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, I can do this too. I can do this for myself. So getting the dog actually led me to raw. And then all of a sudden I was on raw, then my dog was on raw, and then we were both, like raw food buddies. But it was really like, I think getting a dog unexpectedly and being committed that the dog was going to be healthy, and seeing like how all the foods and the options, how easy it is to be a dog because the food's all set up for you. And so then, then I thought, man, and that was another thing. Like I realized, like, if you change the dog's food, they say don't change the food or it'll get runny. And then I realized, no, actually, if you keep it with high quality food, you can change the food and there's not an issue. So when you go to high quality and low quality, and I realized the reason people get runny, they go from fast food to, their diets are so different. One thing that's good is when your diet is consistent, your body likes consistency, like circadian rhythms and stuff. And when I eat the same foods every day at the same times, my body gets used, my digestive tract's right, and it lends itself to being, very effective. But it's absolutely a process, and it's like juicing it first. And then after so much time of juicing it, now I'm eating it raw, now the juice isn't there, and I'm just in this, like the diet I'm eating today, like, I've been working to get to this place for 15 years. Yeah. And I can't believe I finally got to a place where I'm eating this diet that I am, and I'm free of the cravings, and I'm actually enjoying it, because that wasn't possible a while ago. And it was a lot of work to try to figure it out.
Yeah. And, I'm sure people are gauging right now that you're a pretty enthusiastic, kind of high energy guy. And like, you like operate at like 110%, like all day long, dude, like in business, with training, with like the way you show up and your emotions and all of this. You're always like that. And that's why it's a great experience to be around you. And like when we hang out, we train together and we do stuff, it's always like really good, high energy stuff. And you're doing this on this diet. And, I've had a lot of people that have said to me, the comments, you said that you changed from, non-organic to organic. And I've heard a lot of people say, yeah, like I'd buy organic foods, but, it's like so expensive and all this kind of stuff. Something that I would always like to I suppose, put out there as a possibility for those people is that, you know, you and I, we don't go to the doctor. We don't need to like have like prescription drugs, and we don't need to have like, we don't need to spend money on reactive things because our health isn't good. You know, it's like we spend a little bit more money up front on getting high quality products so that we don't have anything on the back end that we have to catch. And, you know, you also mentioned before, you know, reading up on things like cancer and like how do people solve cancer naturally. And I've researched this a lot myself. And then I just thought, well, wait up, if these things that are like natural cures for cancer, if we just put these things in our diet, like how good would our body be? Just normal from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, and that's true. I save a lot on, you know, doctor's visits, but I spend about $150 a week on, you know, and I always buy the highest quality. And, you know, that I think was one of the most important parts about being successful is you got to go to the best place and get the high quality food, because, you know, I think all vegetables aren't created equal. You know,
Yeah,
just
totally.
like people get it with like, you know, cannabis. You know, there's different levels and grades.
Sure.
Same thing with celery. And, you know, I got real present to it more than, you know, 15 years ago when I first started going raw. I was going to Whole Foods and I bought strawberries. And one day I inadvertently picked up the conventional and bought it on accident. And I didn't realize I had bought it. I purchased it, but I took a bite and I'm like, these don't taste right. What's wrong with them? And then I looked at the package and it was through taste. I realized, oh no, I got conventional. So what I'm saying is, like, you know, if I want to be raw, you know, like, and this is all I'm going to eat, you know, and because my food is so nutrient dense, it's low calorie, high nutrient, you know, I don't, you know, I just don't have to eat that much and I get what I need.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, well, you can't run a Formula One car on milk. You know, it needs to have the high performance fuel that it needs. And another quick note on going to the grocery store and getting certain vegetables. If we're getting vegetables outside of the USA or outside of our country, at least if I can speak for this in the USA, there's a process where they actually essentially go through a radiation microwave process in the quarantine, because they need to make sure that it's safe to bring into the country because of whatever other, things can be outside the country. So, ultimately the ultimate goal with, I suppose, getting the high performance vegetables is to grow it yourself, I suppose, or get it locally. But, even if you were to get something outside of the country, it's better if, let's just look at, like, if we're not eating organic foods, we know that we're getting some of the chemicals and some of the harmful things inside it. But the more we are eating organic, the more we're reducing those sorts of things. And so even though some organic classes aren't completely free of everything that we want to put in our body, it's a lot better than if we didn't buy it. So it's totally worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm just trying to do the best I can. And for me right now, the best I can is going to Mother's Market and buying, organic, and, but I would love it. My dream would be to one day, live in a mountain and have a garden and grow my own food and be 100%, self-sustained. But that's just not practical for me right now today.
And you'd only have to grow 10 vegetables anyway, dude. So
that's right.
That's good. So I know you've done a lot of like crazy. So here's the thing, like, Brian's sitting here you're talking about where you're at and what's working for you now, but not everything's worked. You've gone through lots of trial and error. And I know you've tried some things like so far out of the box. I love it. I even know that for a while there, you were sleeping in the closet to eliminate sunlight, and you were like a few doorways away from the closest window that could have possibly had sunlight coming in. And, you wake up at 3 a.m., you went through the juice only diet. Can you share some of the different, maybe out of the box kind of things that you tried and what worked and what didn't work?
Yeah. And let me just hit one thing on the energy point, and then I'm going to bounce over there.
Yeah.
I wear this headset, and I'm sitting in my office right now. But what I do for work is I'm calling people on the East Coast and nationwide, and I'm helping them finance equipment. And I've had days with this newfound energy where I'll get in at 5 and I'll sit in this chair, not take a break, not even a bathroom break. I'll go 13, 14, 15 hours straight. And my energy level at the end of the day is just as high as when I started. And I'm not drinking any coffee, I'm up at 3, get a workout in. By 4:30, I'm in the office. And so I don't ever have to like, I got to eat something. My energy is just balanced throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
You're not up and
well.
down. Yeah.
And which leads me to the whole closet thing. I started realizing how important sleep was. When I was in college, my whole philosophy was sleep when you're dead. Who needs it? And I was like, how can I, if I eat raw foods, I can sleep 2-3 hours. There's some yogis that are pulling it off. And, now I'm big on sleep. And so I spent the last 18 months figuring out how to sleep. And, I even went to the extreme. I was sleeping in my closet, but it was a little congested in there. But for about 3 months, I slept. It's a big closet. But I slept in the closet because I was able to shut the door. It was totally dark. I had waterfalls. I had everything. I was experimenting in the closet. Since then, since then I now have, I have blackout shades that come down, and, I bring the room temperature down. I've experimented with 60, 65, 68 degrees. I find that 65 seems to be the best. I even put a little piece of surgical tape about the size of a stamp on my lips when I go to sleep at night, and it causes me to nasal breathe.
Really?
Because, I've read 2 programs, one by Patrick McEwen, The Oxygen Advantage, and then recently Joe Rogan actually had him on his podcast, but James Nestor did one called Breathe.
Okay.
And that's profound, but that takes your sleep to the next level. And, so I just, my room's totally black. Can't even see the hand in front of your face. The closet was good too, because it gave you total silence. And, I just don't like using earplugs and all that. But yeah, sleep has been, a really big, important part. And that's something, unfortunately, I used to think wasn't important. And I'd sometimes pull all-nighters and, and just not sleep. But I think that was probably one of my biggest mistakes. And now I'm taking it very serious. And, I recover, I repair. One thing I found about sleep is you need the deep sleep for, and I got a ring recently. It's called the Aura Ring. And I read about it in 2 books. And then I heard the NBA's using it right now to, monitor for COVID. But it's this little ring I put on my finger at night. And, man, I learned more in my first week with the Aura Ring than I accomplished more than I had in the prior 18 months, working vigorously to sleep. And the reason sleep has been an issue, because I can go to bed at any time, but falling asleep and getting the quality sleep, that's another story. And with the Aura Ring, I've come to realize that I need about an hour to hour and a half of deep sleep.
REM?
No, to the deep sleep. The deep sleep actually repairs the physical part of your body.
Okay.
And you get that in the first part of your sleep.
Okay.
And then I need about an hour and a half to 2 hours of REM sleep.
Okay.
And that's the dream state. And that comes in the second half of your sleep.
Okay.
And that's what repairs the brain and the mind and the function. And so now I've been able to realize, like, wow, if I just got really good, I could get all my sleep knocked out in under 4 hours. Now, that's hard to do. That's what I'm working at. Now, like, I want to come up with a way to, in 6 hours, get an hour and a half of deep, 2 hours of REM, and just, become like the world's greatest sleeper, where I'm just so efficient with it. I lay down. And there's another thing, when you fall asleep, if you're falling asleep in less than 5 minutes, that's too fast. That means you're too tired and you're not well rested.
Okay.
Ideally you want to fall asleep in 15 to 20 minutes. If you're not, so there's all these things with sleep. What was the other thing you were hitting on?
I was just seeing what other outside of the box things. I mean, I know, you and I, we both have, we do the Wim Hof method. We do breathing exercises, and we take cold showers and cold baths. And, like, what other things outside of the box have you tried that work for you?
Yeah. I studied Wim Hof, and, I do the breathing. I do meditation on a regular basis, and I find that's real critical because, on top of getting your exercise and your sleep and eating right, I find if you're stressed out, that'll throw your sleep off. That'll bring illness. That'll bring gout. And so I manage my stress really well with meditation. A lot of times I become aware of what are the things that are off in my life, and then I can go deal with them. But, I've done, 3, 5, 7-day totally silent retreats out in Joshua Tree, where nobody talks.
Yeah.
You're in there with like 300 people. You're meditating, these 45-minute sessions, 3 times, and then you take a break 3 times. And, so you're just basically meditating all day, meditating in yoga. I've done a bunch of forms of meditation, probably studied 15 different types. My favorite's been transcendental meditation. It's just simple. I do it 20 minutes a day, focus on a little mantra. That I just do that. It's simple. Sometimes I work in a little Wim Hof. With the Wim Hof, because I was trying to beat the gout and I knew he could beat a lot of disease through breathing. James Nestor in Breathe gets into a lot of Wim Hof stuff and why it works and how you can control your temperature through breath. But the big thing I got through Wim Hof that I continue is the cold showers.
Yep.
And now this past week, I recently did a book called Earthing about getting grounded.
Yes.
And so the past week, because I got, after the MMA, I went a little overboard and it hurt to breathe because I think I bruised a couple ribs. But so I started Earthing.
What was that book, by the way?
Which one?
The Earthing book?
It's actually called Earthing.
It's called Earthing. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Excellent.
And it's on Audibles. But one thing I've been doing lately that's pretty amazing is I just go run barefoot on the beach.
Yep.
And then I jump in the water without a wetsuit.
And we're getting our negative ions when we're earthing, aren't we? When we touch the soil and we touch the ground, we're getting our negative ions, yeah?
Yes. And absolutely. And it really gets you back in balance and gets your circadian rhythm on check, helps with sleep. I read a lot of the reviews because they even sell these earthing mats, which I don't have. I live, you
do it naturally.
3 minutes to be, run out my house and be on the beach.
Yeah.
But I've been doing that lately and I've been sleeping better and, it's pretty amazing. So I definitely recommend getting barefoot out on the beach and swimming in the ocean. And you get a little cold therapy too. No wetsuit.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, walking around barefoot on the ground, like at a park or just, like on grass and even gardening and getting your hands in the soils and things like this. It's all earthing. Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's just because of the electromagnetic, field that the planet is. And, you go back 300 years, ago, we slept on the ground and, we were meant to, be connected with the earth. And now, rubber and wood, and there's certain things that don't conduct. And so I noticed I read somebody talked about dreams, and I did that. And I started having these profound dreams, getting more REM, sleeping better. So it's made a difference. I'm still experimenting with this, but it's been pretty profound.
That's awesome.
Now, something else like with water, I think water is super important. I've been through all types of water. I've kind of concluded now that you want your water to be, a little bit alkaline. I don't completely think that have it, being 10 or, I think that's more marketing. But I think you want to be a little more than 7.5, like Fiji water. And so I have an alkalizing water machine in my kitchen.
Yep.
And, I drink, I've got this right here. It's all alkalized water. And
just for listeners right now, the alkalinity in our body essentially eliminates the possibility for disease to thrive. If we have like a certain amount of alkalinity in our body, it means that we don't have acidity in our body. And acidity is the environment where diseases thrive. They need acidity in our diet. So,
yeah. And one book I read that was pretty phenomenal is Tom Brady's book, TB12. And, he's in his 40s and competing at the highest level and arguably one of the top competitors in the NFL and one of the most accomplished. And I thought, wow, I bet he has something good to say about longevity. And he's got, he talks about the 12 things that he really does. And one of them is, staying hydrated. It made a lot of sense. And, I think after going through that, I really made a conscious effort, to drink more water.
Yeah. And I think, it's if we think about that, the planet is 70% water and our body is 70% water, whatever's happening with the water in our body has a pretty profound impact on us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, here was an interest, here was two interesting experiments. One of them, because I was committed to trying all these different diets, and I read about the banana lady.
Okay.
This lady Freely, she's eating 30 bananas a day, and I was like, wow, let's try that. And that was back when I was
just 30 bananas, nothing else.
Yeah, it's called the banana diet.
Okay.
And that was back when I was eating, lots of fruits. In fact, one guy at a seminar, at a peak potential seminar, came and was like, "Are you a fruitarian?" I didn't know what a fruitarian was. He just saw me because at that time I was like, eat as much fruit as you can all day long.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, let me try the banana diet. And so I got my 30 bananas, and I got in the car, and I was driving 2 hours to visit some family in the San Joaquin Valley. And I ate like 15 bananas on the drive over, and I think I over bananaed because I started heating up and it was really hot. And so, I kind of realized when you're doing something like the banana diet, you have to spread those things out. I figured okay, well, 15 working out, you probably had to be like 2 an hour. But, another time, because I was really committed to, being raw. And, that's one of the themes is just going back to nature and doing things. And so I've always had this passion to be able to do an Ironman without taking all the crazy supplements. And I was doing Wildflower one time, which is, it was a really challenging half Ironman distance.
Okay.
But it's up by San Luis Obispo, or kind of Paso Robles area.
Yeah.
A lot of hills, gets really hot, a lot of dust.
Yeah.
And I tried doing that one on just dates and water, which ended up being a mistake.
A complete Ironman, or it's a half Ironman race just on dates and water. Yes.
It's a half Ironman, but I think it's more difficult than some full Ironman just because of, the depth, the terrain, it's steep, and the hills, and the heat and what it is.
Yeah.
Fact,
Central California.
There was a guy who won the Ironman World Championships. He was the Ironman World champion. And then that same year, or following the World Championships, he went out and did the Wildflower, and and DNF, didn't finish the race.
Yeah.
Not that he couldn't finish, he just had an off day for whatever reason. I'm just saying it's a tough race.
Yeah.
But I've finished every race I've ever entered except for that day.
Wow.
And if I had it to do over again, I'd probably finish it because now I have experience. But I wasn't getting the salts in my system, and it was so hot. And so about 5 miles on the run, I went down, and I started heating up.
You went down. You dropped.
Well, I had to stop because I was losing my mind, literally. And some people were trying to attend to me, and that's where I learned about compassion, because usually on the races I just run past people like that's your problem. But it was really cool that a lot of people stopped to help me. Other
races, other competitors.
Yeah, and they got me to a station and laid me down, and because I was overheating, or it was a hot day, and I didn't think I was going to cool down, and so I needed salt in my system was the problem, but I mentally thought I was gonna die, and or I thought I'd be a vegetable, and I had this vision of my mom saying, "Oh, you really did it this time," and feeding me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Wow.
Because I couldn't, Now what I learned is just by getting the salt in my system, if I would have just been patient, I probably would have had to sit there for 20, 30 minutes, but then I could have got back going and finished the race. But unfortunately, I have to say I ended up in the medical tent, and that was the only time. All the other times I've, pulled it together and gotten back in the race.
And then there's some other things you've tried too, like Coca-Cola. You tried drinking Coca-Cola to the finish line. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think this is just an interesting story, and it's interesting about Coke. It was my first Ironman ever. It was the Vineman up in Santa Rosa. And, you know, that was the one I did all that training for, but it was really hot that day. You know, I finished the swim, which was in a river, and then I finished the bike. And then about 13 miles into the run, and it was my first Ironman, so I had all these family members waiting for me at the finish line.
So you're halfway into the run.
So I knew I needed to finish this race, but about mile 13, I was losing. I was going delirious. I'm like, I don't think I can finish this race. But I needed to. So, you know, I laid down, put some water, and, you know, they have these tables with everything. And at the time, I still don't, but I was really against drinking anything carbonated because the carbonic acid, I felt like it messed with your digestion.
Okay.
So I hadn't had a carbonated drink in over 5-10 years.
Okay.
But, you know, long time. I'd tried everything on the table, the chicken soup, the gels, like nothing was working. And the last little thing was Coca-Cola, because they hand those out at the races. And I'm like, I'll try anything. So I took a little like Dixie-sized cup of Coke and I drank it. And instantly I was like, whoa, you know, I got all my energy back. And I ran 3 miles, burning, you know, on the Coke. And then I started slowing down and I drank another Coke and ran 3 miles. And the bottom line is I finished that Ironman on Coca-Cola. And,
wow.
and I felt great, just powered right through the finish line. But, that was interesting because I went from feeling like I was having a near death experience, which incidentally, I mean, everybody does Ironmans differently, but most of my 11, you know, there was always a time, and I think it's just because I overdo things and I'm not great at pacing, which is probably part of my issue. But, you know, I think every Ironman brings on that time where you really have to, you know, face your demons and, you know, to try to finish that race. You know, I always thought one day it'll go away. And, you know, now I think I can compete in Ironman without that. But I think that's one of the coolest thing about an Ironman, or for me, is I had those spots where, like, you know, I call it the near death, or like, am I going to survive this thing? Because, you know, things start seeming like they're just going wrong, and you got to really like keep moving forward and get through that. And it goes away, and then you get better. And then, you know, and I think you learn a lot from that experience.
And that's where your determination, which you get on your shirt there, your determination is actually probably driving you a little bit farther than what your body may be capable of at that time. And so you got to like check in with yourself and go, oh, you know, let's get back in check with where I'm really at with my capabilities. So there's definitely no problem with your drive.
Yeah. And I've actually got 10 of these. I've got 5 in large and 5 in medium because my body used to fluctuate. Now the large is in the garage and I only need the medium. But yeah, you know, I'm off the mark. But one day I said, you know, because I was determined to go back to Kona and win. So I said, I'm going to wear this shirt every day. So I've been wearing determination shirts for like the last 5 years. So I got to get out to Kona and have a good result so I can stop wearing this shirt.
Good deal, man. And on those races, you know, a lot of people wear like shoes, and then some people wear minimalist shoes because they want to get less weight on their feet. And then you've gone all the way to like wearing running sandals. And I mean, have you tried barefoot as well?
When I first got into triathlon, you know, I always do modeling, and the guy who won the Ironman World Championship was Craig Alexander, and he won it wearing Newtons. And they're kind of a barefoot type shoe. You know, I think the name derives from Isaac Newton, but somehow they're like, you know, hey, it's, you know, their idea was barefoot running in a shoe.
Yep.
And I didn't know that, but so I bought some, you know, so I always wore Newtons. I had the top Newtons because he's the world champion. He won it. This should be good shoes, you know, and that's always been my philosophy. I want to have the best stuff so that if I fail, I have to look in the mirror. I can't ever blame my equipment. So I always try to have the best, you know, equipment so that if I fail and I don't do it, I have to look in the mirror and be accountable for what's happened. I can't ever blame it on equipment. So I'm running my Newtons, and while I wore shoes, I you know, because you're training a lot, you're always running, and so I was always having issues. Black toenails, I was losing them, shin splints, I'd get pains in the knees. And so I was going through this phase where about 6 or 7 miles into my runs, my knee would start to hurt. So I went back and forth from the Newton to a Luna sandal because I heard about the Tarahumara Indians in the Copper Canyons of Mexico running like 200 miles. Plus, I think they're cool. It looks like a Spartan shoe. They've brought the technology a long way, but I could never, they were uncomfortable, so I didn't quite do them. And then I went and did this little race. It was like a 6 mile one, a 10K. And it was called Conquer the Bridge. And I finished the race, but there was these 2 guys that finished the race like way ahead of everybody else. One guy was like a mile ahead of everybody. And I went, and his name was Patrick, and he represents the Luna Sandals. I went up to acknowledge him for doing so great in the race, and I looked down, and he's got these sandals on, and he crushed everybody by like a half mile on a 6 mile race. And then I was like, he's like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. And so when I bought my Newtons, they shipped me a book called Born to Run. And that's another book that, since the raw food diet that I read cover to cover. There's just a lot of ideas about how as shoes progressed, injuries happen. And then, I read about, this Ethiopian who set a world record in the Olympics barefoot. And it just goes into, when you're wearing shoes, you're using the cushion of the shoe. And so it made a lot of sense. I saw this guy win a race. I said, let me try this. So when I was having my knee injury, I went back and forth. One day I wore the running sandal. The other day I wore the Newton, which was the top running shoe for triathlon at the time, or in my opinion. And eventually I just kept wearing, the running sandal, and then they improved how you wear them. And now, I do my Ironmans, and I won't run any other way. And since I did that, all my injuries went away. Because the idea is, as I run in these sandals, I'm running on, the fronts of my feet, and I'm using more calf and hip as opposed to using the back for the knee. So, I just haven't had any running injuries. It feels good. Okay. It's amazing. And I've, again, one of those things where I've done it both ways. And what's interesting to me in the world is there's a lot of people who say, oh, I couldn't do raw foods, but they've never done it. There's a lot of people, when I run the marathons, people come up and I know what they're going to say, like, wow, how do you run all those miles in those sandals? So I kind of play a little game. When I see them about to say that, I kind of beat them to it. I'm like, oh, wow, how do you run all those miles in those shoes? Because, man, and now that I look back on it, like I personally don't understand, how people do it. And I've had friends that are competing in marathon and Ironman. And, they make Boston or they make Kona, but then they can't even go because they're injured. Yeah. Or they get this amazing marathon time, and then the next 3 months they can't even run because they're injured. Or they're getting all their knee surgery. A lot of people get knee surgery, and, like people say, oh, like you run all the, it's like, I think there's 2 things why I don't get injured. A, I'm eating the right stuff. So my joints, tendons, and ligaments, because I'm on this raw food diet, they're strong, so I can handle running miles and miles, and 2, I'm running barefoot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
And
that's awesome. Keeping it simple. I dig it.
Yeah. Another thing too, when like the water in Long Beach, it looks kind of dirty, and, some people say it's polluted, and, I've had people, like after it rains, like, oh, you can't swim there. And, one time I was getting ready to jump off the docks into the water, and the guy's like, it's polluted. And, I looked at him and I'm like, the whole world's polluted. I just jumped in and did my swim. But, I started thinking about it. Mentally, I was letting it beat me, and I was thinking, is this water dirty? Can I really swim in this water? And, I'd get a little issue, and I'd think, oh man. And then, now I've got a different perspective. I'm like, if it's a little bit dirty, it's going to build up my immune system. And, hey, I'll be bulletproof. So it's like, so now I always swim in that water. And if I have an issue, it's like my immune system will catch up. I'll get stronger, and then there we go.
And so much of this that you're saying and so many of your experiences comes down to the mentality behind it. You know, if we're sitting there freaking out thinking that something's going to destroy our immune system, or something's going to make us weaker, or something's going to make us sick, or something bad's going to happen, then we're going to be manifesting that in our life. And on the flip side of the coin, if we're looking at circumstances and going, well, they're probably not the best circumstances, but I'm going to get the best out of it anyway, we're going to be looking for all the opportunities, and that's what's going to show up. And we're going to be creating that. So this is awesome. I love your mindset. And I know that we're going to have to wrap it up here soon because I fully respect your time, but I do have just a couple more questions left for you. So unless there's something you're really pressing to say here.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing because, you know, I touched on the health and, you know, and I enjoy my life. You know, I live in my dream home. I drive my dream car. My health is the best it's ever been. I love my business. I work with the most wonderful people. I wouldn't do anything else. But in my business, for what I do, you know, after I came out of this wheelchair and I made these adjustments, I made some changes with the organization. And, you know, the last 6 months of 2019, the end of 2019 was 20 years in this industry. In December, I had my single best month in the history of doing the business. And last year was my single best year. And I attribute a lot of it to like just the diet and the, you know, being clear minded and, you know, being able to fund and do things at a level that, you know, were thought to be impossible in the industry I work in.
Yeah.
So that's it. Let's get your questions.
Yeah, and I've seen that, man. You know, I've been watching you over the years and watching your business grow, and you're doing amazing things. And we've been talking about health today, but, you know, like I said, you know, you've got good balance and these things are growing in your life in all areas. And that's awesome. So let's just talk real quickly on some of because I'm a big fan of daily rituals. What's some of the key, what would be like the 2 or 3 key daily rituals that you have, that you practice, that you think propel you forwards?
Yeah, 2 of the biggest ones that are really simple is I do a gratitude list where I just write down 3 to 6 of the things I'm grateful for. And I was doing that twice a day. Now I'm doing it in the evening. Helps me sleep better. And, you know, there was a time when I was just really stressed out and I didn't know how I was going to make it through the next week. And so a friend recommended I do the gratitude list, and it got me through that. And I've been doing it ever since, like the last 5-10 years. But I you know, now I do it on my phone. But so the gratitude list, I do a top 6 the night before. And every night I write down, you know, tomorrow, to make it a great day, you know, what are the 6 things that I'm going to get done the next day?
The main things, like the big rocks, the critical things that if you only did these 6 things the next day, then you would have an awesome day.
It'd be awesome. Yep. So, you know, I do the gratitude for appreciation, the top 6. Now, some of the key things for the morning that I found really good is the meditation first thing. You know, a run first thing in the morning, about a 30-minute run. Core work.
Yeah.
Hitting push-ups. You know, some like, well, I do toe to bar.
Yeah.
Squats, handstand push-ups, and you know, just hit the core muscle work. Another thing I do every day is when I have my meal, I listen to my Audible, so I can constantly be, you know, so daily I listen to Audible, and, you know, I take books down that way. And in the evening, as a result of the gout, the only way I could get the pain to stop some days was getting in an Epsom salt bathtub, because it, you know, you get kind of the gravity. So, because when you have gout, just the weight of the foot is torture. So I started doing these baths, these Epsom salt baths twice a day.
Yeah.
And now, you know, now I get in every night in the evening, I do a hot Epsom salt bath.
Nice. That's awesome. That's great. And, you know, like we've talked about all of these things, and some people are probably sitting there and they're going, man, this is like way too overwhelming. Um, you know, and I know here at Freedom Hack Radio, we talk about, you know, financial wealth, health, relationships, spirituality, and having fun. And the whole point of those 5 things is that we want to be growing and maintaining balance in these areas to truly be fulfilled, because that's where fulfillment comes from. And I know from my own experiences that, you know, I've had times where I've felt like I'm pretty close to like having really, really good balance on them all. And then I've also had like plenty of times where I drop off the bandwagon and I'm like, man, this week I just really wasn't on top of my spirituality, or this week I just, you know, wasn't on my A game on my health. And like this week, you know, maybe I shifted too much and didn't put enough energy into growing my business. And I don't want people to think that it's like some kind of perfect path. I'm like always shifting and adjusting. It's like the space shuttle that goes to the moon. It's always like 1 degree off and like correcting along the way. I mean, what's your experience been like? I mean, it's not perfect, is it? It's like there's always something that we can improve and shift, and we're trying to like get back on track to stay to have perfect balance. And it's not a perfect thing, is it?
No, not at all. And in fact, I've even implemented, you know, I do the gratitude in the top 6, but now I do one called lessons. And, you know, each day I kind of write down, like, here's what I learned. Here's what I want to improve for tomorrow. Sometimes they're small things, but, you know, and I think that's why I need to do the gratitude, so that I can focus on what's right and not get too stressed out about where, you know, even with my diet, you know, I'm talking about all these things, but I'm not perfect.
Yeah,
you know, and it's possible 2 weeks from now, I may eat a cooked food meal. I'll regret it and I'll learn from it, and then I'll get on path for 3 or 4 weeks. But, you know, or, you know, so I'm constantly making errors and learning from them.
Yeah. And that's going to happen to all of us. And so if we're sitting here saying like, this is all perfect, it's just not like that at all. So just get used to it not being perfect and just recorrecting along the way. So I've really appreciated everything you've shared with us today, Brian. And I want to leave with a thought here, is that if we had the capabilities for you to jump on the phone and speak to the 20-year-old version of you, what would be the biggest key piece of advice that you would give to yourself?
You know, I've always said, man, if I could go back in time and do this life over again, I would start with eating a raw food. Like, I'd be on all raw foods from the beginning. I just think my life would have been so different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be the number one thing, because I ate, you know, my eating was so bad. And so that would be the biggest thing. I would come out of my mom's womb, and, you know, or when I was 20, or as soon as I could, and I would just be eating the way I am now.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. The next biggest thing would be sleep. I would have paid attention to my sleep, you know, the entire, you know, time. And, you know, I think those are the 2 biggest things. If I could have ate right and did a better job with my sleep. And then maybe the last one, if there's a third thing, would be, I would have started reading more aggressively at an earlier age. I think I took it for granted. And I think my big concern now, like, I always wish I could just stop time for about 10 years and read and then come back into the world. But I would go back, and I just wish, you know, as early as I could comprehend, if I would have started doing like a book a week my whole life, you know, like, because every time I read a book, it's like it unlocks, like, it's almost like you know, just life gets better, and it gets easy, you know, the challenges are different. And
how much we grow.
That's
amazing. That's amazing. And so how do listeners get in touch with you, Brian? Like how would a listener follow up with you and reach out to you?
Well, I've got the rawwarrior.com, and there's a place on there where you can actually send me a message, or you can email me at brian@rawwarrior.com.
And we're going to leave these links in the show notes too for everybody.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say, you know, on Facebook, I've unplugged. I used to do daily messages, and so I've unplugged from that. But soon I'm going to be, you know, getting back out on Facebook and, you know, following, you know, documenting progress and stuff again, which I enjoy doing. But Facebook's another way, and, you know, just Brian Acosta on Facebook.
That's awesome. And again, for everybody, we're going to have these links in the show notes so you can reach out to Brian and keep up the pace with him. And then, I mean, any final thoughts? Is there anything you like just really just busting to share with us, or any like advice that you would give to people out there who are listening to this and watching this that want to make these improvements in their life so that they can get towards freedom and get towards fulfillment?
You know, I would say it's just baby steps. Um, you know, if you want to, if you want better exercise, it might be with, and you're not doing it right now, you know, 5 minutes, maybe it's just, hey, I'm going to go walk for 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you get that down, then try for 7 minutes, then try for 10 minutes, or it might even just be standing outside and breathing. But,
Yeah.
but I would just say, figure out where you want to go, what the things are you want to have in your life, and just what's the smallest little step that would be easy. And if don't, whatever you think, if you think you could do 5 miles, maybe just do the 2.5 miles, and or maybe you do a block. You think I could do 2 blocks. Well, then cut it in half and get that down, and because that's going to be real easy, and then go for 2 blocks. And then once you nail that down, then go to 3 blocks. Just go. Less is more. And I've had it took me a long time to learn this, but be patient with yourself and just find small little steps to move in that direction.
That's beautiful. And I just think that's a beautiful way for us to wrap it up right there. Brian, I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure. And it's been an awesome conversation that we've had together. It's always great hanging out with you. And thank you, Freedom Hackers, for listening and tuning in right now. If you've gained some value out of this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and subscribe to us. And also, same thing, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to leave a review. The more that you do that, the more that other people out there can find this valuable information and make positive changes in their life as well, because we're fully committed to all of you living free. Brian and ourselves, we love our life, and we want you to live a life where you can truly say that too. So thank you all for tuning in. This is Freedom Hack Radio, and until next week, I'm Bryce Robertson, your host. Live large and live free.